Hello, everybody, and welcome back to BrickSide Chat, where we take your questions and turn them into conversations. I'm Paul.
And I'm Evan.
And today, we're going to talk about staying motivated when you're growing a business. And later on, we're going to be talking about a few of the methods we've used to help avoid burnout and stay motivated in the business.
Yeah, so this is a topic we've been thinking about now for a little while in terms of doing this. Because we're 3 years old now in terms of operation, which is cool. Welcome to 2023. And
it is really nice that we started the business at the very beginning of a year.
It is actually. Yeah, it just worked. But you know, we have seen a ton of ups and downs in terms of motivation, the degree at which we are growing the business and establishing concepts or like things. And so there's been a lot of ups and downs, and I think a lot of points of lack of motivation or just
complete absence from working in the store.
Totally. Or just because of a burnout or something.
Yeah.
So I think, well, actually, I'm pretty confident, unless you're amazing, every business entrepreneur or business owner or whatever goes through these phases of like, you lay down in bed at night and you're like, is what we're doing worth it? Is this going to pay off tomorrow and next week and next month and next year and in the next decade? Like, or whatever your vision is. I think everyone lays down, has those moments of lack of motivation or lack of belief that what you're doing is going to succeed because you're burnt out and you're tired and stuff. So obviously we've been, like I said, had a lot of those ups and downs and stuff, but I think it's good to bring up some of the points that we do since people have asked us before, you know, what keeps you going? I don't think we've ever got that exact question, but you know, things to that degree. Maybe we have actually, but certain things like, why do you keep reaching and why do you keep growing and how do you keep adding to the inventory and what keeps you? Because when you really look at it from the business on an outside perspective, if you don't know anything about BrickLink or Lego or anything, we do this really weird thing that seems really, 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 really repetitive and doesn't produce a whole lot of income for the amount of work that it feels like you do.
I mean, there have been times where I've explained what we do, and I've said that the dollar margins on pieces are in cents.
Yes.
And it's
when you can sell a piece for a half a cent.
Well, we don't actually sell any pieces for a half a cent, but like not just the revenue coming in, but you know, obviously our margins are a decent percent, but on some pieces, the actual like cash profit on that piece is measured in cents, and we're not running a microtransaction
on many pieces.
Yeah,
because most pieces don't sell for more than 15, 20
and you know
cents.
They always say it's never worth selling something for a penny, but I haven't done the math, but I bet you there are some things in our inventory where the profit is about a penny.
Oh yeah, there's probably some things where technically that piece is a loss.
Yeah,
but yeah,
but that's always elicited some shocks from people. Is we are working for cents. You know, it's not exactly that, because the total gross is way more.
Yeah, because you of course have to keep in mind we're selling thousands of parts in a day, so it's like you know, thousands of cents times or one. Yeah, you know what I'm saying. So there is that multiplicative there. If we were only selling 20 pieces in a day and we only had a 5-cent profit per piece, then we'd have a problem.
But we used to be selling only 20 pieces in a day.
Yeah, no, at the very beginning, this business was not much of a business. And that was another discussion we had, is when does a business become a real business? And we wrote that down, and we'll talk about that at some point. But
key thing is we don't feel like we're a real business yet.
Yeah, I mean, definitely in the beginning, we knew we were not a real business. I'd say coming into this third year that we're at now, it does feel that we are, because we have the operation of like money comes in and money goes out, and it feels like it's this cycling thing of paying people and having income. Like, it does feel like it's a business now that can operate. But definitely at the beginning of 2020, there was no, you know, the thing that kept us going was the hope in
January, our total sales income was $400
of 22.
No.
Oh, of
no.
2020, our very first month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we had 15 total sales, and we sold 1,000 items.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
So
1,119 pieces.
0.5 sales per day.
Yeah. And that was just the beginning. And now when we look at it, you know, we're doing 8 10, 12 sales per day, depending on the week.
With an all-time average.
The problem is if you go all time, that counts that half a day.
No, I meant like month where we've had the highest average, but I honestly don't remember.
Oh.
December was kind of a bit of a slump, but
yeah. I think September or October was our best month of last year. In terms of ordered numbers, I'm not entirely sure. Gross revenue, it was September, but I'm not sure in terms of order volume what our best was. But it was probably on that edge of 10, 12 orders a day, I think.
Yeah.
In that direction. Anyway, the motivation of, things like December, when December's not as good of a month, how do we stay motivated through that?
I mean, last year, 2 years. I'm having a really hard time counting months here, but there was a month, a September, where we were really expecting it to be fantastic. And it really was not fantastic. Or was it in August?
August historically has been bad for us. Year after year, we hope August gets better. And it's not that it's actually gotten worse or anything, but in terms of the sales, August has never been good. September is always our hope of, hey, we're coming out of the summer slump or the summer slowdown. We expect September to hopefully be good. It might have been 2021 that you're thinking of.
That sounds right.
Yeah, you're looking at the numbers now, but 2021 was definitely, a year when we grew. We doubled what we did from 2020, but I think we were hoping to do more than that, and by the end, we really weren't there.
No, I don't think that. I don't know. Brick Freedom's numbers, I'm not actually looking at our accounting records because those are a little bit harder to access, but I'm looking at just the Brick Freedom numbers, and I'm not, the math on there is a little bit weird because I remember one month where we were like seriously concerned.
It could have been in August.
Yeah.
Because August, like I said, has been pretty bad, but, everyone has those ups and down months of it's a good month, it's a bad month. More so on that edge of, I think, when you're having a good month, at least in my opinion, let's say you're at a scale of 0. You haven't had a single month. When you have a good month, I'd say it bumps you up to like a 5. But when you have a bad month, I think it brings you down more than 5. I feel like a bad month usually brings you down like 7 or 8 or 9 points or something.
Are we like, is this like a motivation?
Yeah.
Really?
For me, it's like when there's a bad month, that more so makes you question and stuff to a higher degree than I think in my mind a good month makes you think, yeah, we're doing everything perfect.
Because I would almost say the opposite. I found it easier to slack off in good months and harder to slack off in bad months. Because when it's the bad month, it feels like it's...
I guess the thing
maybe this is an unhealthy mindset, but when it's a good month, it almost feels like it's not my fault that it's a good month. Everything is just going well. And then during a bad month, it's like it's my fault that it's not a good month. And so I need to work hard to make it a good month.
I think something else with the business we are in is if you work really hard one week, you do not see a return that next day. So part of it is too, when you work really hard on a down month, because this month has been really bad, you see that return next month, which now feels really good. And I think with what you're saying is on a really good month, now you can slack off a little bit and slow down. And then next month again is slower.
Which is false. I'm not saying that you should do that.
Yeah, not that that's an exact up and down of each month is 1-to-1, but I think the difference, and we were talking about this when we were trying to talk about the point of like kind of building our outline and stuff here.
Which I swear we do have an outline.
Yeah. You had talked about your perspective of motivation, where for you it's a lot less of the big picture motivation. For you it's more of the in the moment task, like what is this and how can I get motivated to do through this, whereas my perspective personally is more of a big picture motivation. I look at something and that pushes me towards doing something to hopefully achieve some goal, which I think might be my reasoning for like a bad month brings me down more so than a good month brings me up, where yours is the opposite because you are more in that task mindset.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's totally true. I've never really had an issue motivating myself on the biggest pictures because that's just so abstracted, right? It's very easy for me to lay out a plan for something, and to dream about something. But when I actually sit down to do the work in the minute, that's where the motivation struggles for me. If I see a bad month, that doesn't really make me want to give up. But if I sit down and see an awful category I have to catalog, and I know I'm going to be slogging through that, that's where the motivation hits me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, not that I don't feel that lack of motivation when it's like, I look through a bin of all 1x1 bricks and I'm like, okay, I got to sort this.
Oh, but that's a fun one.
Well, okay, see, different mindset already. Yeah. But to me, that mindset of that moment of motivation does not equate to the big picture. In terms of the thing that motivates me, like me saying, hey, if I'm done with this task, then I can move on to something more fun, like maybe, I'm trying to think of a different category that's more fun. Maybe, okay, I can go fulfill orders. I don't know where we're going with this, but for me, it's that bigger picture that's the motivation.
You liked doing torsos.
I did enjoy cataloging torsos, actually. That was pretty fun.
And that was probably because of Brick Monkey, but
it was, and it felt very productive, but it was also fun to like. So because I do the fulfillment usually, and I go through the inventory, and it frustrates me when something's cracked in there because my mindset is you as the cataloger, or in your department as when there's other people with you, my mindset is your quality standards weren't high enough, so now I have to deal with the problem. So when I was there, to an extent, I was able to make sure that the quality standard was up to what I wanted it to be so that I didn't have a problem later. I think that might be why I enjoyed it, because I would find a crack, and it was frustrating when I found a crack, but it wasn't in the inventory yet. So it was exciting that I could fix that problem preemptively, I think.
Thank you for your assessment of my quality standards.
No problem. No, we've had a talk, and it's been fixed mostly. And I think, we also talked about the potentially cracking in the drawers.
I think
over time.
Very slowly I'm convincing Evan of that. Now, I will say 90% of them are due to catalog error, but there are some torsos that get in there that I am so sure, like I know the torso. Like there is this Bane fig. Thankfully, I was able to correct it. Very small tangent here, and then we'll go back. But that I was absolutely, because it was a good fig, and I checked that. And the next day, I went to go pick it. Mm-hmm. And it was cracked, and I was having like one of those serious like self-gaslighting moments of like, did I really check this fig? There's just no way. And so what I think it is now is that when I was checking the fig, I did replace an arm, and I think the friction of replacing that arm cracked it immediately, but the crack wasn't visible yet because it was so tiny. And then over the course of the next couple hours, it widened. I don't know if there's anything to do about that, but I don't think it's that things just randomly crack in there. My assumption is things get replaced when they're being cataloged, and you just can't see the crack. But yeah. Anyway, this really isn't a Lego podcast. It's a business podcast.
This kind of ties into, you just took responsibility for that, and that's a Paul segue. That is a Paul segue, and that's kind of the first, I think, tip, and you have a lot more of these tips in terms of the motivation stuff, whereas I have a few more of the tips, I think, in terms of the burnout and how to try to prevent that. But one big motivation tip type thing, I guess, is taking responsibility for the task you're doing.
Something that I have had to learn that, unfortunately, through no fault of my parents, I was not sufficiently educated. I was an extremely rebellious child, and any attempt to get me to do work as a child was met with extreme timeout. Was ineffective because that just meant I could sit down and do nothing. So, it didn't really work. But something I had to learn, especially as an adult, where, now there's reality, is how to take ownership and responsibility of something. And that, the real apex of that is kind of owning a business, because you are 100% of the consequence, the immediate consequence. There's going to be natural consequences if you fail, which I will talk about later, but taking responsibility is about the acceptance that you have elected to put yourself into a position where there is no social safety net anymore. And in the way of like when I moved out, mommy's not there to bail you out. It's, if I don't do my laundry, the laundry is not going to get done. Right. And in the business, if I don't catalog these pieces, nobody's going to catalog these pieces. If I don't fulfill the orders, nobody's going to fulfill these orders. There's no backup. There's nobody that you can go ask to remove your responsibility. And that, coming to that acceptance and that realization is really, I think, the core of running a business, is setting something as this is the task that has to be done, taking responsibility for the failure of that task, and then pursuing it, because there's only one way to go, and that way is up, right? Either you fail or you move forward. And part of the responsibility in Evan and I's case is also we have the responsibility to a business partner. If I don't do something, there's usually not enough time now for Evan to do it. Like way back when we were kids, if I broke something, Evan could fix it. Now, with how many tasks there are, it's not possible. If Evan doesn't do something, there's a likelihood that I'm not going to be able to have time to do it.
Or if you do have time, it's taking away from something else you should be doing.
Exactly. And so the business partner is not a safety net. The business partner is someone to be scared of in a way.
Right. I think we can hold each other accountable.
Yeah.
In that sense of like frightening each other to doing work.
Yeah. And something that I think we should disclaim here is Evan and I are very negative people. And I mean that in the sense of what motivates us is mostly negative consequences. Now, there's obviously the positive consequence of we want to one day be wealthy, from a business. But that's, I don't know about you, but on a day-to-day level, that's not what really motivates me. On a day-to-day level, it's more negative consequences. And that doesn't work for everyone. A lot of people, when they are motivated by negative consequence, or when they encounter a lot of negative consequences, it's going to give them anxiety. So we're going to talk a little bit about the negative consequences that we use, but I want to be very careful to say that if you're the kind of person whose mental health is going to be harmed by thinking in these pessimistic or negative terms, then obviously that's not effective for you, because if you're going to be anxious and stressed, then you're not going to be a high performer, right? It's just thinking negatively is something that does work for Evan and I, in the sense of motivating ourselves by getting anxious about something.
Yeah, looking at the negative consequence that will come out of this if this doesn't get done versus looking at the positivity that will come out of it.
Correct. And so I just want to add that disclaimer, is we're not advocating for you to bully yourself unless deep down you know that is the most effective way to do something. And anyway, continuing on taking responsibility, something that really motivates me, and this is almost a little embarrassing to admit, is the shame, the social stigma attached to having failed is definitely something that keeps me awake and forces me to do something. Is I don't want to have to admit to everyone that I've been, verbally dreaming about the business to. One day, it's the famous, one day I'll be rich. Not that this business is going to make Evan and I rich in the sense of, super wealthy. It's a Lego business. But in the sense of one day I will be completely economically stable because of this. One day I will have these nice things that I want. One day I will run my own business. One day we'll move out of the garage, right? All of those things that I've told people.
Right.
The fear of having to say none of that is going to come true is maybe the biggest motivator. It's very closely tied with failing the business partner. Don't underestimate the social influences, because, failing the business partner is a social influence too. But don't underestimate the shame factor there. That is definitely something where if I'm really close to giving up on something, I will go and think, I'm going to have to tell someone that I am the reason why this failed. Mm-hmm. Not someone, because there's a difference between an asteroid smashed into the house and the garage is on fire, right? I won't have an issue admitting that to someone. But if I know deep down that it was my routine laziness that caused the business to collapse, I'm going to have to be honest and admit that, because that's just, it's very scary. So I don't know if you want to talk about that.
I 100% agree in terms of that public failure concept. And obviously, in addition to that, not only do we have the people like friends and family who we talk to this about, but we also now have this viewership on YouTube and I would say customers / fans of the channel or the brand or whatever it might be, who also now, have that the hope for our success for the most part. I'm sure there are people who watch us who say, I hope you guys fail. Like there are people holding their breath for you to fail, but like there are, but the goal is to have them suffocate, not like give them that success. And so to admit that not only like makes the people feel good that we're like, oh, this is never going to succeed. You of course have doubters, even the people who support you. Not everyone who supports you is actually going to be completely 100% supportive on stuff. They're going to an extent, they're going to want to believe that you can, or hope and cheer you on. But the concept of maybe whatever your dream might be a little out there. So letting those people down is definitely one of my fears. And to say, in addition to the embarrassment of like, I spent years of my life pushing and pushing and pushing and telling people who are telling me this isn't going to work, which is another like point of motivation, is the people who are telling you, why are you doing this? That's not going to work. It's like, now I want to prove that person wrong.
Yeah.
That's a huge thing for me, is like those people that are like, don't believe in you. I want to prove you wrong.
Yeah, that also is one of those things. Whenever I encounter someone who is like, first of all, almost never do I hear someone say that's stupid, but it's more.
You can tell when someone goes like, oh, that's cool. Interesting.
Yeah. That, every time I hear that, it just fires me up to get back to work, because it's like, one day I'm going to laugh at you. Exactly. Right. And
hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully. And I know that's like the most petty thing ever, but when you're part of it is you really have to get motivation from all's fair in love and war. And it's this kind of the thing here. If you can get motivation from something, unless you're actually hurting someone, I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with getting motivation from a source. If your hatred, we're going to have a couple dark side analogies through here, but if you can, use your hatred or whatever, that is a powerful motivator. You just need to be careful not to become lost in it. But there have been times where what has pushed me through the day has been anger at something. That's very rare, where it actually, longitudinally affects me. Day. But there have been things, usually it's an argument with Evan, where it's like, I'm going to prove him wrong or something. But that anger makes me get to work and makes me decide I'm just going to do this, even when even when I lost the argument.
I would almost say if you lose an argument, not you, but either of us lose an argument with each other, now there's more of a reason for us to be like, okay, now I have to prove my point through the method of what I'm going to do.
Well, that's the thing, is I have found sometimes there's a very recent occurrence which didn't go all the way through, but where we discuss a policy or a practice, and I end up losing the argument, and I now have to do the thing in the way that I don't want to do it. One of the things that ironically motivates me to just do that is my anger. Like, it's kind of, I'm going to do this job so well, even though it's such a weird mentality to explain. Maybe you kind of understand a little bit, but it's like, I'm going to prove this person wrong by doing what they said is bad, but I lost and I still have to do. And I'm just going to do it perfectly. It's.
I mean, here's the thing. Like you just said, really any form of motivation, as long as it's not mentally taxing on you, I think is a form of motivation that should be counted as towards something. If it helps to push you to do something.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, hopefully, there's no like we just said, no mental pain that's coming with that, or like physical pain with that.
Something that is very important, and we'll talk about clocking. I say that, so I need to find a different something that is also more important. But another cool thing is that we can clock out. Well, actually, we can't. That's a cool thing we'll talk about later
too.
But all of these negative thoughts that we use to motivate ourselves, they don't really impact me when I'm trying to have fun and I'm doing something else that I should be doing, right? Because there's obviously I want those intrusive thoughts when I am procrastinating and then I need to get back to work. But also the thing is, if I'm out socializing with friends and it's a scheduled thing and I shouldn't be feeling guilty about it, I'm usually able to not feel super guilty about it, which maybe that is something that I have struggled with before. That might be a good podcast episode, is overworking a little bit or not being able to clock out. But the struggle of balancing these negative motivators versus just being happy in your normal life should not be a thing. So if you are using all of these negative emotions to fuel your business, and then when you try to go to bed, you're still ruminating on it,
right?
Then this is not a healthy method for you.
We've talked about it before. You and I have this weird ability where we can be mad at each other on a specific subject relating to the business, but once we've clocked out for the day, we are now friends again and we're fine. And maybe tomorrow when we clock back in and this thing gets brought back up, now we're upset again about it. But we're only upset in relation because we're both so passionate about whatever belief we have that A is better than B or B is better than A.
Yeah.
So if you can't really push that aside, it's a problem. We talked about this in the business partner one. If you can't, as a business partner, push things aside and change the priorities of what needs to actually be important in that discussion at the moment, and you're holding like grudges on old things and stuff, that's a problem. But yeah, I think motivation-wise, in a weird way, we have that negative motivation. And obviously, that's not the only motivation for a lot of people.
We do have a list of positive ones here that we had to Google.
Well, no, but there's also like that concept of, you were on vacation for 2 weeks in November, I think. And I had this motivation of, I really wanted to do as much as I could so that when you came back, you were pleased with the work. That was my motivation. So it wasn't like there was a negative thing of Paul's going to be mad if I don't do enough. That wasn't my thought process there. Of course you would if I didn't do anything. But it was like we had a Black Friday.
I was mad about one thing. The cart was still there.
Yes, and yes, but I left that there on purpose because you put it there before you left without cleaning up. So there was an intention for that. But no, but it was the concept of like Paul was on vacation and I could impress him and have this surprise-esque thing when you come back, as it seems like a lot of work's been done and everything's going great, versus you come back and have to deal with this, disaster of whatever's happening because, I was actually the only one in the store for 2 weeks or whatever it is. So in that sense, there is that positive motivation in our environment, I guess, of also just trying to impress each other. Like you have goals too of like wanting to finish a category in a day as a surprise or something. Like it's not just negative stuff, but we did have to look up some more positive motivators. Something else though is that Paul had brought up when we were talking about earlier was if you're really not motivated to do a task and you're really bored with it or whatever it might be, and you are doing the task and you decide, you know what, I should really finish this up, but I'm just going to call it quits here and I'm going to go be done, do XYZ in your own life. You now, next time that you have to do a task or something, you've given up early on this initial task. Maybe the very next task you do, you're not going to give up on. But if you consistently give up on tasks over and over and over again, I think it becomes easier to continue giving up versus really pushing yourself all the way through, where it's then harder to like when you give up, now it feels like a problem instead of this constant normalcy of like, hey, I'm just done early because I want to be.
Yeah.
Which we'll talk about in a minute, which we're trying not to do, but with the setting times and like kind of keeping track of your time and stuff as well.
Yeah.
And I think that ties back to this. If you say you're going to be in for 8 hours, unless for some reason you can't, if something happens, you have to leave. of course, leave. But your goal really, if you say you're going to be in for 8 hours, why don't you, you should really try to be there for your 8 hours like you said you would, not only to fulfill the requests of everyone else and the commitments you made to them, but to fulfill the commitment to yourself.
Yeah. You're going to train your brain to quit the more often you quit. And it's going to become hard. And then you're going to have to untrain yourself to quit. And something I have done before during low points of motivation is if I kind of have this deep gut knowledge that I'm not going to finish the task. Like if I know, because there comes a certain point where I just have this inner knowledge that my motivation is basically expired. Mm-hmm. I will say, okay, there is a minimum quitting level here. I need to complete, even if I'm not going to be able to complete the whole bin, if that's my task, but I know I'm not going to be able to complete it, I can't just stop now. I need to say, here is the minimum goal that I need to accomplish. So at least that way, I still forced myself to do a little bit more. And then next time I can force myself to do a little bit more and a little bit more. And then gradually I will be untraining myself to quit, right? It is, kind of the solution to that, because obviously sometimes a task that you expected to take an hour is going to take 4 hours, and you just, you're not going to be able to do that.
Right. And sometimes we've talked, right before we did this, we talked about setting goals and how we set goals that are a stretch to get to. They're not like impossible. Like, if we said we're going to add 1 million pieces this month, that would be an impossible goal. But if we say we're going to add 100,000 pieces this month, very unlikely, really hard task, but not impossible. And so we set those goals sometimes, which maybe is part of our problem with like feeling like we're not as productive as we should be. Because we do have that problem where we'll go like, why is this taking so long? And maybe it's really not taking long. It's just the timeline we had set up for ourselves. It's not matching because we're setting these goals that are really, really difficult to achieve, which is a different motivation sense where it's like set up for us at least. And maybe we'll talk about changing this slightly or not. But we set a goal that's really, really difficult, not impossible, but hard. Yeah. And some people set really easy goals. And then for them, they feel better when they achieve that goal. Because they're achieving goals constantly. Whereas we don't actually achieve our goals on time very often. We usually hit them, but it's not like within March, we want to hit 700,000 pieces. Maybe, but like that's a hard goal. So maybe April or May we'll hit that 700.
Yeah, I've said this before, but I would rather hit 80% of 100,000 than 100% of 70,000.
Yeah, that too.
And that is kind of our goal idea. Now, we try our best not to put employees under those unreasonable goals,
because we understand the it
doesn't work for everyone.
I can't think of the word, but it's
disappointment.
I mean, yeah, I guess there's another thing I'm trying to think of, but it is disappointing when you keep missing goals, for sure. We just mentally know that disappointment is like fine. I don't know. Whereas if an employee sees this constant disappointment because they're never achieving what they wanted or what we set for them, they think it looks way worse probably than we do. So other motivations, obviously, economic factors. There's things there. Usually in the business world,
I would hope so.
Overall, the concept is that you'd like to make some money.
Although something is. It's possible that somebody might be watching this podcast who wants to start a nonprofit, in which case, you would still like to probably eventually be able to at least pay yourself, because you can't help anyone if you don't have the resources to help anyone. So just to kind of generalize into that wasn't originally on my notes, but just something I thought about is there is still an economic factor there, because if you can't pay yourself to work for the business or to work for the nonprofit, then the nonprofit can't do anything. So.
Yeah, the nonprofit needs to raise money or generate money in some way to pay the people that do the stuff. But that is true. We hadn't really thought about that. We are, I think, for-profit minded, in especially in the business we're in now. At least that's the direction for sure. Obviously, we're going. But yeah, usually with a business, the goal is to make money. So there is that motivation. But if you've been doing this for 3 years, like we have, and you're not taking home a paycheck that's like a great paycheck, you can for sure lose that motivation there. And you keep telling yourself, I'll get paid more next month. But there's always something that comes up. And as the business owner, I think 4 profit minded, especially in the business we're in now, at least that's the direction for sure. Obviously, we're going. But yeah, usually with a business, the goal is to make money. So there is that motivation. you always have to pay your employees first. You have to buy inventory first. You are the lowest thing on the totem pole in terms of where your money's going.
Yeah.
So
you really that is something that I do want to bring up just from an ethical standpoint. Minor rant here. You should be the last person to take your paycheck. Everyone else should come before you. I just felt like that should be an ethical stance that we should take. Is
right.
We should not bankrupt the business. Make sure, it comes up in the news every once in a while that a CEO basically, in my view, absconded with money, even though they didn't do anything illegal technically. But I don't have anything wrong with $1 million paycheck for a CEO, but that $1 million should be surplus, or the last paycheck that goes out, basically.
And yeah. Right. If you hear the CEO making $40 million a year and now the employees don't get their bonus at the end of the year, or their benefits are reduced, then there's that ethical question of what's the thing here. But of course, that's for a bigger business and stuff.
Yeah. After something else is, there comes this hill when you're starting a business, and that is the, okay, I have to quit my job, or I have to put myself into a situation now where I am taking on a lot of risk and I can't go backwards. Because, at least in our experience, there is this period where you just kind of have to take a leap of faith, because the amount of time you're putting into the business exceeds what you can, exceeds keeping multiple jobs. But at the same time, you're not comfortably making a lot of money in the business. You're probably making enough that you can survive for a couple months here, or however long it takes. But if the business doesn't succeed soon, you're going to have a problem. And that period is incredibly motivating. because
you're relying on something.
Yeah. If you fail, you're SOL. And there's nothing more panic inducing than, panic is the wrong word. There's nothing more anxiety inducing than
not paying rent.
And that makes you, it's really hard to express to someone who's never been in a situation like that before, or is not contemplating, like someone who isn't at the moment where they're going to have to make this decision, the amount of anxiety that can build around that. And I would almost say that it's positive anxiety, because those periods in our business, not that, taking the full leap is, I have quit my job. I do this full time, but the leaps, because there are little leaps up until then, are where you're putting it all on the line and you just need to work, and you just work, because that if you fail, there's not going to be a recovery. There's not going to be an easy recovery. Hopefully you have not put yourself in such a situation that you're going to be homeless, but
and hopefully the business has not put itself upside down in terms of debt to asset ratio and everything too.
Yeah, that's another thing. But not all businesses are like ours, where there are some businesses where you probably do need to debt higher than your liquidation value. We have a very, very strong policy of never taking out more debt than we could liquidate for, ever. And that's not a policy I think will ever change. But there are some businesses like software, or, that's really the only one I can easily think of, where you might have to take out more than you can liquidate for. And that is I can imagine another very intense motivator. Debts of any kind are an intense motivator. Not that I suggest going into debt just to get some motivation, but it is something that,
right.
Having to pay your loan is something that, banks are scary. I don't want to mess with a bank. It's something that's going to make you work. And, so economic stress is definitely a motivator that Evan and I both have felt running this business.
I think it could be both good and bad too, in terms of that stress, depending on what it is.
Yeah.
Because I think the stress of working hard so you can pay yourself is vastly different than work hard so I can pay my employees. Because I think in my opinion at least, the stress of paying myself, while still stressful, is way less stressful than what if we can't make payroll on Monday? That to me is terrifying.
Yeah. I will admit here that we have been in that position a couple times where we have been looking at the accounts and we've been like, ooh, that payroll is going to be close, right? We've made it, but that kicks into overdrive.
Right.
We'll make a separate video on employees eventually, probably once we've grown more and we have a larger team, because not that we would ever do this, but most of the people that work for us now are very close friends and probably would have an understanding if we skipped a pay period. Not that we should ever, do something like that. But once we have
not that we wouldn't pay them, we just delay it a week or something.
But once we have a big team, I think we're going to be a bit more comfortable making an employee video. But your employees are, why, part of a big reason as to why the business exists. And so the stress of knowing that
not only does your livelihood rely on this, but other people's livelihood relies on the success of your business.
Other people's families. We have a group of employees who come from the same family, and
the majority of their income is us.
And that is something, that when I say keep me awake at night, that doesn't, I use that expression a lot. That doesn't necessarily always mean that I'm literally awake at night, but something that I think about, and ruminate over is, if tomorrow Just a Brick in the Bucket didn't exist, hopefully they have savings, but eventually there's going to be some problems in that family, and I don't want to do that to another person.
Yeah. It is cool to have that reliance on us as a business. However, it is a lot of weight on your shoulders to know that those other people rely on you to make, successful decisions, proper decisions, both financially and just in terms of the way the business runs, and ethically in terms of how you're treating them. And there's a lot that the employees and the people are trusting in us to succeed and to support them and everything, which is kind of crazy.
There's a lot when you're starting a business that
I guess the key with that usually is that when you're starting a business, you probably don't have that.
Correct.
That is something that gets piled on later, which then I think does cause more, stress and motivation potentially, if that's what motivates you. But in the beginning, that was obviously when it was just you and I, or even when it was you and I and Kyle in the garage. None of us were being paid.
No.
We didn't owe anyone any money. It was like whatever money came in. Well, it was so easy.
The business owed us a bit.
Oh, the business, of course it owed us, but not in terms of we had no real debts to anyone, no employees who we had to make payroll with every week. It was a very simple time.
Yeah, and the other thing is, I think those first couple months are where you need advice on motivation the least.
Totally.
Because it's novel, it's fun, and you don't need to put in that many hours, at least for our business, right? The motivation, at least from my perspective, and this totally depends on the field you're getting into, because if you sit down and you're going to say, I am going to be the next Microsoft, I'm going to be the next Amazon, I don't have any advice for you. I'm sorry. But you're going to need to work like hell to get there. And I can't tell you how to summon the motivation to do 100-hour weeks for 6 months. I can't tell you how to do that. But what I can tell you is, in the very beginning, you should be building a framework to motivate yourself when you run out.
When you run out
of that early feeling of novelty.
Oh yeah.
And you should have frameworks in place already, so that at least for me, the burnout is going to happen like, oh, I'm so into this. It's not.
Well, and it did for us in that first year.
Totally.
The first 6 months or so, we were in that novelty stage where it was really, really fun. In addition to that, 3 months in, COVID hit. So we also didn't have anything else to do. And I'm very much a person who wants to be doing something. So of course this was the thing I could do. But actually even through summer, we were still doing that. But after summer, come like October, November of our first year of operation, we also were remodeling a house. We had a lot of things that were going on, and that kind of fell on the back burner, and it was no longer this really novelty thing. It was like, okay, who's going to come in today and pick orders? It was not this is our full-time thing. We do this every single day, yada, yada, yada. It was like, that is when our first lack of motivation happened, and it was a total drop-off. It was not a slow decline. It was like, snap your fingers, and it was totally gone, which is really, I think, common, most likely. I would assume, maybe I'm totally wrong here, but I would assume that the majority of things, when motivation is lost like that, it's a big drop off. And if you were relying on this business, maybe you don't have that drop off. But for those people who haven't hit that point where they're really relying on a business, we've seen it actually within our own community too, where people have started stores similar around the times we have, or maybe a little after, and they've hit a point where they just aren't feeling that fulfillment and the success that they've wanted to. And they've lost that motivation, and they've decided to shut down their store. I can probably only count on maybe one hand of people who I know off the top of my head have done that, but that has happened to people just because of things that happen. So obviously that, I think, is a relatively common thing, especially for smaller startups.
Definitely. And something that we don't actually have on here at all is, I just lost my train of thought in the middle of a sentence.
You don't even know what you were going to say?
I don't.
Okay. Well,
we're going to move on.
For real?
Yeah, for real.
Okay. There are sometimes I start a sentence.
What was it you said, like, right before that tangent? Because it was a direct response to that.
I don't know. I couldn't go back that far. Sorry. It was our drop off at the beginning of the year. And then I said there's a number of people who I could count probably on one hand that, haven't succeeded, unfortunately. And I don't want to say they gave up. Maybe some people did.
Oh,
okay. Here it is. I knew if I kept going, you were going to get it.
Something that we haven't even touched on, maybe because we're past this point and it didn't even occur to us, is the fact that business isn't instant. And this used to be, if you look back at old videos, old interviews that we did, old stuff like that, we would always say business is a long game. It takes 5 years to build a business. You're not going to be successful overnight. Now that has kind of just sunk into the point that we don't even think about it. We just know we're working towards this eventual goal. But that definitely is something that I think a lot of people could struggle with, is
the concept
they're expecting 6 months in, I'm going to be able to quit my job.
Right.
6 months in, you may have to quit your job, but that doesn't mean,
your paycheck here is not going to be the equivalent to what your job was, most likely.
Yeah. And that is something that I think maybe we should just spend a minute talking about, is how to get through the motivation of when reality hits and you realize this is going to be a long haul.
Yeah. So I think for me, one thing for me for sure is I look at the big picture of things. I look at a 5-year plan. Not that's written down, but like a quote unquote 5-year plan of what I envision this to be. And frankly, we're at we're done with year 3. So we're 3/5 of the way through, and we're nowhere near that 5 that I was hoping for in mid 2020 or whatever. However, I'm still looking 5 years in the future and have this vision and this grand, way overflown or built vision of what will be. But that overbuilt vision is the motivation to keep reaching for that. I think for me, that's why I can keep going, because we have this goal of, it's not even a spoken goal, but this random goal of being XYZ, whatever we want to be. And in my mind, I'm sure it's different than what yours is. But at the beginning of 2020, that wasn't my goal. Somewhere in or towards the end of 2020, I'm sure that concept started to float around of being whatever I want us to be. And then obviously through 2021 and 2022, that continued to develop. And every day I'm changing slightly what that goal is and stuff. But I think in order to get that to that mindset of like you're reaching for that next thing, you need to set goals short term. We've set long-term goals and some short-term goals, but the majority of what we do is a long-ish term, like over 6 months, which isn't really that long-term, but if you're only 6 months old, that is a really long-term goal. Part of the motivation with that, I think, is let's say you're in 6 months and you set your first goal at 6 months and you didn't hit it. You need to realize that like 6 months in now, this is not the time to like say you're done and you failed and give up. What you need to do is go back to the beginning and look where you started. You know, we're halfway through the year, and cool, we've increased, you know, from $0, now we make, you know, $3,000 a month or whatever it might be. So look at the beginning and see the things that you did to help you get to that point that you're at now. And then I think see how you can implement those now at a grander scale, since you're larger, to get you through the next 6 months to get to your next goal. And I think setting those shorter term goals, as in monthly goals potentially, like, hey, this month I want to do this many sales, or this month I want to bring on this many new clients, or this month I want to take a week off. You know, whatever goals you need in order to motivate you through this, which don't need to just be business focused goals. I almost said miserable focused. They don't need to just be business focused goals. They can be goals that relate to your personal life. You know, if you say, hey, I want to do this thing in June.
Evan's really trying to get me to speak up my travel goal here. I have an extremely unrealistic goal that's never going to happen.
I totally forgot. That wasn't where I was going. But if you want to share it, you can.
Yeah, I have a completely unrealistic goal that's not going to happen, but I'm going to sleep well at night knowing that it will happen. Is I want to be able to work remotely and travel for a quarter in 2025. Not going to happen. I have a whole list of countries that I want to go to. And basically, I just want to get on an airplane with my laptop and a backpack and to just go to an airport, go outside, go to the city, a couple days, buy another plane ticket, get on the plane, and just go to wherever the cheapest ticket will take me. And just do that for like a quarter, you know, traveling internationally.
The key is you want to keep working.
And I want to be able to keep working while doing that. But
we will have to figure out how to get you working.
the issue there is
we're such a hands-on business.
Our business is very hands-on business. And so the size that our business would need to be for there to be enough remote tasks for me to work on that is huge. And that's probably not a goal that's going to happen, but it is something that I strive for. And it is something that I work. You know, it is one of those things where when I wake up and I'm like, why am I working today? It's, I want to be able to travel, right? Or
and we talked about that earlier, just in terms of we usually set goals that are not the most realistic. And for us, that's okay because we are not like super discouraged. That's the word I was looking for earlier. Discouraged, not disappointment. We are not super discouraged when we don't achieve a goal because we still look at it as a positivity of, hey, we did this, which is good. Now, if you never hit a goal, I think it's a problem, but we have hit goals. We just don't hit the majority of them because
they say
20% over budget, 20% over time or whatever. Yeah. Same concept there. So there's, of course, you know, I don't know where I was going with this, but that goal, if you set an unachievable goal and that discourages you because you know you'll never hit it, don't do that. Try to set a goal that is achievable and stuff. And then if we want to break down that goal even more, of whatever it might be, I know we're being really vague here, but I don't want to tie this back to just what we do in terms of add X amount of pieces, add X amount of lots. So like whatever goal you want to set, something you need to do here is like don't underestimate the power of a to-do list.
Something I have here is Agile for your life. For those of you who don't know, Agile is a thing in the software industry where they basically break up everything into 2 weeks, and every feature can be completed within 2 weeks. If you have a really big feature, then it's a lot of 2 weeks, but at the end of every 2 weeks, something will be able to be used. It might be a very small thing, but it will be complete. And I have been starting to try and implement that into my own life in the sense of here's this huge goal I want, but at the end of every 2 weeks, I am going to have something completely done in relation to that goal. Not partially done, but completely done. And I think that approach is really applicable to a to-do list in the sense of you have these little things called story points, which are individual tiny little tasks that take a couple hours maximum. And you just check them off. And if you do all of those at the end of the 2 weeks, your feature should be complete. And in our case, that might be a category shouldn't take 2 weeks, but that might be
5 bins added.
5 bins added. And if I do all of my story points, then I should be done with that. And there's something extremely satisfying about checking boxes. Maybe that's just us becoming adults, but
yeah, a checklist, obviously you need to think ahead. And this for me is part of the issue when it comes to checklists. Like I can build a rough checklist, but I can't really build out like 6 months because it's like,
neither can I.
Yeah. To figure out those steps are hard, which is why I think like you had mentioned the agile, whatever in your life thing, breaking it down into smaller goals is really the way to do it, and achievable little things so that you can achieve that bigger thing.
Yeah.
Another thing here that is, we mentioned briefly, is taking the time to kind of reward yourself, whether that's because you achieved a goal or just because you need a week off. And we'll talk about that when we really go over the burnout and like how to try to avoid burnout. Cause I think that's probably another reason we see that large drop off, like all of a sudden is just, you maybe worked so hard for 9-10 months and didn't take a break. And now you didn't hit that thing and you're just done and you're burnt out. And now is when you just crash. But taking some time to like step away from the business for a minute and reward yourself, whether that's a vacation or whatever it might be. Like you went on a vacation, you were in Hawaii for a couple weeks, and when you had mentioned when you came back, that was a massive, just like refresh, reset. And you were able to like start over.
Before I left, I was for probably about a month leading up to the vacation, I was struggling to hit my hour minimum. And there were a couple weeks where I didn't hit my hour minimum. And I was just kind of feeling not done with the business in any capacity. That's not at all what I mean. Just tired, existentially tired.
Understandable.
And I left 2 weeks. I guess I texted with Evan about the business, but no email, no Discord, business related. I just tried. I don't want to think about just a brick in the bucket at all. And I came back almost to the same level of motivation as when we were first starting, right? And I don't think that 2 weeks, I think I could have done it on 4 days, which is now a goal that I've set, is I want to take a 4-day break every month to 2 months and just check out. 2 months is probably a bit more realistic, but
I think that's incredibly realistic.
Yeah.
Because
go ahead.
It's just to constantly be in that headspace of not checking out, not checking out in a negative way, but not checking out where you're literally just taking a break, I think is actually really bad and really hard. And like I also went to Hawaii, but I worked when I was in Hawaii. I didn't actually check out to any extent, and I didn't come back refreshed in any way, like you did. And so I definitely struggle with that disconnect of like, let whatever's happening happen, and I'm just going to do my own thing. I can't do that. It's really, really hard for me, but I understand that importance of like trying to let it just go away so that you can actually take that moment and reset. And I don't think at all 4 days in even a month is unrealistic, because you should not be working 30 days in a month. Like I do.
When was the last month you did not work 30 days?
No, that's you shouldn't be. I understand it's not good, but to take 4 days off, absolutely. Like that's a great thing. And I think that's part of the rewarding yourself and stuff. And taking a break that gives you a time to kind of reset. One more thing in terms of motivation before we lead on to, which obviously a lot of this kind of overlaps in terms of avoiding burnout and motivation. They're very, very similar topics, which is why they're mashed together here. But every business has tasks that you're not going to want to do. Every job, period, I think. So, let's just say, for example, something I'm not a huge, massive fan of, yet it is my job, is verifying. We verify the orders before they go out. And now occasionally Paul verifies and stuff, and it's good to change things up, but I verify probably 85% of the orders that go through.
Yeah.
Roughly.
Maybe even more. I rarely we've discussed this before, but Evan is basically our fulfillment manager, and I'm basically the inventory / processing manager.
You're like inbound, I'm outbound.
Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah. So anyway, I do the majority of that, and it's not a task I like doing, but it's a task that we have found to be incredibly helpful when it comes to accuracy of order. And obviously, the last time we talked about customer service and all the problems we have, but there's the goal of mitigating that with the verification step. But essentially, you're taking an order that's already been picked and everything, you're pouring it out and you're verifying it. You're double checking everything, the quality and the count and the color and everything. And of course, errors get made and stuff, but it's really a task that I don't have a crazy love for. I understand why we do it, but it's not fun. And when you stand at the computer and you look to your left and you see 12, 14, 15 orders piled up, maybe a Monday there's 20 orders piled up that have been picked, sitting in the cups waiting for verification. It's this crazy massive task that I'm not looking forward to doing. And so you have to find something about the task that you can enjoy. And I even think part of that is, I will turn on, we always have music going in the garage at the at the bare minimum. So not necessarily the task itself becomes fun, but you add things to the task that make it more enjoyable or more bearable.
I used to call we'll talk about this a little bit more, but in the rare tasks where I literally can't have anything in the background, I used to call it working raw. And
I've never heard this.
When Connor and I were doing inbound, right, so processing and cataloging and all that stuff, there were occasionally categories where we just had to turn off the music. And like Gen Tech is one where maybe music is okay some of the time, but there are some things where it's like I just need silence, and it's hellish. But anyway, continue. I just thought that was a little
So like at the minimum we have music playing in the garage when orders are being picked and reassignments being done and we're verifying. But I also will put on a TV show that I've watched. For example, The Office, which is, I've seen it probably 6 times all the way through now. I'm on my 6th or 7th right now.
It.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot of episodes. But anyway, so that's on, and it's there, but it's really not distracting me in the moment because for the most part I'm not watching it. But it's something that makes the entire task a lot more bearable. And I'm sure there's a productivity decrease. Guarantee it actually. But I don't think it's great enough than me being upset and mad and annoyed with the task at hand. Obviously, there are certain things where, like you had mentioned, sorting, you have to turn stuff off. And of course, if I'm counting out 200 pieces for an order, I can't be listening to other people talking and music and all this. I mean, maybe music's fine, but all these things, I have to, pay attention. But even when doctors are doing surgery or something, they're not in a dead silent room being dead serious about stuff. They're whether they're talking or whatever, or there's I've never been in a a surgical whatever.
Well, I do know they listen to
music and stuff. Yeah, exactly. So that stuff is happening. And I think you need to find the things in the tasks that you can add on to that make them more bearable as well. We used to, and we stopped doing this, but we used to watch shows in the garage while we were parting things out. Now we stopped doing that, I think partially due to the decrease in productivity, because for the most part we were actually watching the show. It wasn't something that we were actually I do this a lot where I have a show, or I'll say it, the People's Court on YouTube. I watch this and listen to it. There's not much to watch, so I listen to it. And my phone is sitting next to me and I have my AirPods in or whatever and I'm listening, but I'm not actively having to watch that. And frankly, I'll be verifying an order. I'll listen to a whole episode of The Office or the People's Court, and if someone says, what did you just listen to? I couldn't tell you. In all honesty, I have no clue what I listened to because I wasn't actually paying attention to it, but it made the entire process more bearable.
Yeah. And for me, it's usually I listen to lecture series, and I've been trying this thing of not consuming content that is not educational. I do still sometimes watch, YouTube shorts and stuff like that, but the 95% plus of the content I consume now is educational in some way.
Well, and you can't be scrolling through shorts as you're working.
Yeah. And while I find that the little bit of focus that I actually need to give to what I'm listening makes the task I'm doing a little bit faster, because it depends on what I'm doing. But if I'm bee sorting, for example, which means I am just separating mold types, or if I'm color sorting and I have this huge pile, if I'm listening to something that actually requires some concentration, like a calculus course or a physics course or something very
nerd.
Yeah, something that requires a lot of focus, I actually go faster than if I'm not listening to anything. because your body just takes over and it knows what to do.
Yeah, especially color sorting. It's such a brainless process.
Yeah. Now, I don't do that when I'm picking orders or verifying. But that is something I have noticed that just, it makes those tasks so much more bearable. And it also means I look forward to some of those tasks. I have transformed color sorting and B sorting from a task that I actively want to avoid to a task I actively want to do, because I have now paired it with this activity that I enjoy, which is I want to make I count the amount of lecture series and books that I get through, right? And so I know if I sit down and I color sort and I do all of this, I will be able to consume some of that content.
Yeah, it was interesting because in December, I think, or maybe end of November, we had 4 full bins of medium bricks, and I had gone through and sorted them so it was easier to catalog, and we filled up an entire bin of 1x2 bricks. And you were cataloging, and I was separating it on the table across from you, and I was like, oh, look at this, and you're like, oh, I want to do that. And I was like, what? Like, I've never heard that. Like, it looks like a terrible task. There's like 15,000 pieces in this bin, and you were all excited because it was a mindless task you could do while listening to something that you could actually pay attention to.
Because I had been cataloging figs up until then, which sometimes I can't even listen to music. Depends on the fig thing, but
right, because of the amount of detail.
I totally could just I made a lot of progress. Moving on though, I think to something else about enjoying a task is sometimes for those tasks where you just can't have anything in the background, even if you can't enjoy it, you have to find something to appreciate about the task. I won't say enjoy, because there are some tasks that you just won't enjoy. But there's almost always something you can appreciate about. That was a voice crack there. Almost something you can appreciate about the task. Whether it is the chaos of this massive pile of gen tech becoming, orderly as it gets sorted into its, mold types, or for verifying the pile slowly decreasing,
right,
and the errors getting found. There's an art in everything that you do, and it's about finding that art and appreciating it, even if you don't actually enjoy it.
Yes. No, I totally agree with you there. And like for me with the verification, it is exactly what you said, where, I mean, obviously the pile is getting smaller, which is nice, but when you find an error, as frustrating as finding an error can be because it got through the inventory and whatever, the ability to fix that error before the customer gets it, it is that fulfillment and that enjoyment that you can find in that process. Mm-hmm. I'd prefer not to find errors, but it does feel good to know you fix something ahead of time.
Totally.
For sure. And I totally understand the concept of, and I think this is why some of our A sorters and B sorters are so good at what they do, and they really like what they do, because they see this bin. If you're an A sorter, you see a bin of complete chaos, and by the time it's returned to us, you see a bin of organization, mm-hmm, or whatever it is, with each piece in its correct category. Same thing with B sort. You get
reversing entropy.
Yeah. Like it's really interesting because certain people have that mindset of like they see chaos and they want to organize it, and that's that fulfillment where other people can't do it, which is another thing with business is, if probably at the beginning you're the first one, or not the first one, but you're the only one at the business. The goal would probably be to really tie together multiple people who have different strengths, and then you can actually bring together. We'll say I don't want to say multiple people in terms of perspectives and stuff, because you're probably not a business partner with 5 people, but hire a manager that's really good at this, hire someone else that's really good at this, and hire someone else that's really good at this. And when you're all together, now there's all these different avenues of specialty, if that kind of makes sense, which totally. we have to do with the A sorter, B sorter, and catalogers. A lot of people cannot overlap into certain things.
We actually talked about this during our last stream, is some people, they can't do A sorting, and I'm one of those people. Mm-hmm. I can't do A sorting. It is really the only task in the store that I have a 0% success rate for trying, because I have tried it and I have failed every time. So I think having someone who can enjoy a task is absolutely essential. And part of the thing is for you as a business owner, and I'm about to contradict myself about the A sort here. The A sort thing here is
you have to do every task.
You have to at least be able to find something of value in every task.
Yeah, and every task. This might lead to that burnout.
By the way, just in case you're seeing us occasionally face out, we're communicating via Google Docs here.
Yeah. I think we'll head into the burnout, because one of the things that I had talked about was being able to delegate tasks. Mm-hmm. If you are specifically, you're the only person doing whatever you're doing, then of course you can't delegate to others. But like, we fortunately are able to delegate to an extent where some days I'm in here cataloging because I want to, and I'm like really in a groove, and I'm like, hey, Paul, can you just go verify orders? And you do. And it's good because like it gives us different opportunities to like take a quick break from our main task.
And that's a very new thing.
This has only been going on for like a month or so, where we rotate.
Very much divided the roles. And when I came back from vacation, we experimented a little bit with swapping. And it was kind of a bit of a game changer in terms of motivation. Knowing that someone else could take over the cataloging for just a couple hours while I went and did something else, or vice versa, would allow me to return completely not burnt out.
Right. And it removes that repetition. I think... So there's a contradiction here, because staying motivated is like, if you establish a routine, usually you can get in the swing of things. But if you're doing the same exact thing every day, which a routine maybe is that, or a routine could be a series of things that you do in a day versus one thing you do all day. Being able to delegate in tasks and switch off and rotate, I think keeps you from being burnt out, which might be for the smaller stores when it is a one-person thing. Maybe they don't get burnt out because they don't have one person who does fulfillment and one person who does cataloging. They do everything.
Yeah.
So maybe that's part of the reason why single owner stores we see success in. Actually, I don't know of many partnered stores.
No,
there are a couple that have multiple people. I don't know how officially it's owned as a business and stuff, but there are a few that have partners, but the majority, like vast majority of stores, is a single owner.
I can't really think of any partnerships that I know of where everyone there's not someone in charge.
Right.
It's always usually there's an owner and then there's two very long-term employees who know everything.
Yeah.
But aren't actually making the executive decisions. They're just providing advice.
Right. And that is, I think, a slight challenge for us.
Yeah.
And obviously as we continue growing, we'll see where things end up heading, and if we stay in this exactly 50-50 two partnership thing together, who knows? In terms of, and I think that was maybe part of our separation with I'm fulfillment manager and you're inbound manager, because that gave us that division of line where you have authority somewhere and I have authority somewhere else.
And we still definitely do that. When I am still definitely very much the catalog, inbound manager, and Devin's still very much the outbound manager. And when I go and I do outbound manager for a couple hours, I follow his rules. And for the most part, he follows my rules in here. There are some things that I probably do differently in there than he does, but they're not policy. It's just I might count in a slightly different way with a different hand than he does, or whatever, right?
And that stuff doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. If I'm cataloging something wrong because the color is wrong, then we got a problem.
Yeah.
So I think another thing in terms of avoiding burnout is really, which we started doing fairly early on, and we actually did it based on paper. And this was more accountability for each other, but it's really keeping track of your time. Mm-hmm. When you're operating your business on your own, you might think you're doing a lot of work in a week. But if you don't keep track of your hours, it goes one of two ways. You either think you're doing 40 and you're actually doing 20, and you're shocked when you find out you're doing 20, or you think you're doing 40 and you're working 60 and you wonder why you're tired all the time. So keeping track of your hours and understanding how much time you're spending, not only in general, but I think on each task, is a good way that helps you get a concept and understanding of how your business works and how you can better balance your business with life. Assuming, because usually when people start, they're not just they full 100% in the business. They're business with a job usually. So I think within that, you need to set some limits to your time so you don't burn out. Now, hopefully that's not 10 hours a week. Hopefully you're able to do more than that. not to say 10 hours can't move you in a forward direction, but it would be a little difficult. But set limits to your time. Entrepreneurs, I think they say something along the lines of like, give up your 40-hour-a-week job so you can work 80 hours a week. However, that's not exactly true. It might be for a period of time, but you really don't work a 9-to-5 job. Maybe you set up your schedule that way, but it's not like a solid in at 9, out at 5. You don't care the rest of the day. A lot of people say you work 24/7, but you really shouldn't work 24/7. You're on call. That's quote unquote 24/7.
That's exactly the right way to think about it, is on call.
But you should not be working.
I mentally, in terms of worrying about the business, do kind of clock out when I clock out, but I'm always ready to do something, right? If something comes up, then I will be ready to go handle it, but I'm not necessarily going to be paranoid in the same way that I might be during the day. Right. When I'm clocked in terms of actively checking, is there a customer service email that I need to respond to right now at 9 p.m.? That's not what I mean by clocked in.
And this took us a while, I think, to find this. And I'll still reply to a customer service email in the middle of the night if I'm like, oh, okay, I'll go pick the piece and ship it to him real quick. But there's a lot more of an understanding between us now where it's like the customer can wait 4 hours. It's 7 a.m. I don't need to email them right now. I can wake up, take a shower, like do whatever. And then when I'm in at 8:30 or 9 or whatever, now I can deal with the problem. Where I think for a while it was for sure there was this frustration between probably both of us towards both each other where an email would come in and there was no like official policy at when it should be answered. It was just like answer it whenever. Where now it's like there are work hours. If you email us at midnight, you should not expect us to get back to you in 2 hours. If you email us at 8 a.m., that day you should probably, on a weekday or a work day, you should expect it. But definitely keep track of your time and set limits in terms of what you want to, or what you're able to work. Because obviously if you burn yourself out because you do this much in 6 months, it doesn't matter how well you did in those 6 months. If you're burnt out at the end of that and there's no motivation or drive to keep you going, you've wasted 6 months. You haven't actually built anything. The goal is a long-term steady burn. This is not a sprint. There are moments of sprints, of course, but really a business, we've talked about, the 5-year, you're not profitable for 5 years. That's the long-term business build out. Within a year, it's really hard to have a stable business at the size you want it to be, unless you're super in debt because you took out a crazy loan, which, is of course an option, I guess. Something else really important, I think, is taking breaks. Now, we talked about this with the vacation, but also don't just work a 10-hour day without taking a break. Technically there's, and you know what it's called.
Pomodoro.
Yeah, where you work 25 on and then you take a 5-minute break and then you do 25 on, take a 5-minute break. And that's a lot more productive over a course of 8 hours, or we'll say 10 hours, than 4 hours on, 1 hour off, and then 4 hours on again. It's a lot more mathematically or whatever. Obviously the way you run your business and the way people work are all different, but theoretically taking that break on a task or whatever, and you do this where we both do it sometimes where we just lay on the ground
I have
for 5 minutes.
Something that I've struggled with in terms of, this is more motivation than burnout, is if I take a informal break and I go on my phone or whatever, it's going to be a real struggle for me to get back to work. But there's also the inverse. If I just sit there and work, I'm going to slow to a crawl. And so it's about finding this balance. And so what I have found to be very successful is I set these very regular, I take a lot of 5-minute breaks throughout the day, but they are very strict. I don't go on my phone during a 5-minute break. I just usually, honestly, I lay down on the floor. And it's not 5 minutes. I have this knowledge of, I am ready to get off the floor now. And a lot of times it's less than 5 minutes, but it's basically just not when I have the motivation to get up, but when I start to feel the building energy, I guess I'm sure you kind of understand.
There will be times you walk in the garage and I'm laying on the floor. It's really weird, but it's an incredible.
It's a beautiful experience.
Yeah. The thing is, the floor is not the most comfortable, but it's more relaxing than standing actively working. So it gives you a moment of like break, but you're not going to unless you're exhausted. You're not going to fall asleep there, and you still have this determination to get up because it is the floor.
Yeah.
It is gross, actually, though.
No, but it really is something where it just allows me to collect my thoughts and get clear my burnout, really.
Yeah. No, and there is like, mathematically also 60 to 90 minutes if you're working on a task is very productive. You can be productive for 60 to 90 minutes, but you really can't after that. That's when your productivity is going to exponentially decrease, or it decrease, maybe not exponentially, but it will decrease after that 60 to 90. So you should be taking a break in between there. Like we don't enforce this with anyone who works for us. When we have more employees, maybe we'll start doing something. But also I think to an extent, besides state laws, obviously labor laws, I think we'll be flexible in terms of telling people, hey, you can try this and this and this and this, and whatever you think works for you, do it. At the end of the day, the break time is the same, whether you're taking 5-minute breaks for the whole day every 45 minutes or you're taking whatever.
I mean, this is more for employees than for a business owner, but if an employee this is an extreme example. I probably would never allow an employee to do this, but extreme example to make it more obvious. If an employee required 4 hours of breaks to do 8 hours of work in 4 hours, that's,
very extreme example.
That's very extreme, but that's costs me the same as just having them work 8 hours.
Yeah.
And so, for applying that to being a business owner there is no point in trying to force yourself into something that is going to just not work. If you got to take breaks, then you got to take breaks, because it's more important that the task gets done at all than it gets done efficiently, to an extent.
Well, yeah, and the not taking breaks might hurt the efficiency of that task.
Yeah.
Which is kind of the point I think we're getting at here with the breaks throughout the day, is the efficiency level at which it gets done is not as important as, the task getting done in the first 4 hours of the day versus the first 4 hours and 15 minutes of the day, but the task was more efficient. If that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
It might take a little bit more time, but in terms of actual dollar per whatever value and like quality of the task, that's more important usually than the speed of the task. And last two things, which we really already went over in terms of burnout. We talked about setting goals where, don't just set a 6-month goal, but set short-term goals so that you feel like you're achieving stuff. And you're not just reaching and reaching and reaching and reaching for something that you hope eventually turns into something else. Then you won't be burnt out, because just striving towards working towards something, and as the owner, when you think something and you don't know what that something is, that could be very discouraging and just eventually lead to a complete burnout of like you're sprinting towards this thing, but it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. So those shorter tasks of like 1 lap is better. And then of course, like we talked about the taking a break, where you were able to leave for a few weeks. Not that a few weeks is needed, but it's essentially that think week where you leave and you're not involved in the day-to-day operations of the business. So you can take some time, not only for yourself, but also to reset and to kind of come back and stuff. And those think weeks don't mean don't look at the business at all. You can think about the business and stuff. And usually I think people do. And that's when people come back with ideas as well. Not that your conscious decision was to go take a week off so you can build ideas on the business, because then you're working and it's not going to naturally show up like it would if you're just taking a week off. If you really love the business you're working at or you're building, I think even taking a week off, you'll have ideas.
Totally.
Which is just the natural, and unless you, like I said, you really don't like the business, in which case maybe that week off could lead you to the realization that this is not what you want to be doing.
Yeah, I mean, that is something I guess we can finish talking about burnout is, sometimes you do just burn out. I mean, it happened to me at my previous job before coming to work here. I only was able to really realize it after I had already quit, because this took over, but just how done I was working at my previous job. And that can happen in a business too, is there comes a certain point where you might realize that this really isn't for you. And if you are properly managing your burnout and yet you're still getting burnt out, that's the sign. I think there's going to be a lot of false burnouts before you really come to the inner conclusion that you're done. And I think when you realize that you are truly done, it won't be, you'll be stressed about what's going to happen next, but you'll also just have this, because I'm sure there are things in your life where you've just realized this isn't working. I'm done. And there's this moment of just calm knowledge, certainty that you are done. It's not, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Oh my gosh, this is failing. This is not working. I'm done.
Right. I actually had that pretty much in November, when, I didn't quit anything, but all of my other work slowed down drastically. And that's why, like, I have a goal of eventually, hopefully making this my full time where I can do this, and still do some stuff outside that I want to do, but not rely on all that outside stuff. Because in November, I was working and doing all my stuff, but I had a lot more time to focus on the business. And for that month, 3 weeks, whatever, 4 weeks it was, I really was like really happy. And just felt like, obviously financially I was not making the money I needed to make and everything. That's why I work outside, but I was really happy with doing the business, working at the business, working with the people that work here. And I was so much happier and had so much more pride and joy in terms of what was happening because I wasn't stressed by all these outside factors. I was spending 60 hours a week working in the business, which is actually, lesser than I would be if I'm working at the business and outside. And it was like relaxing. And it was really, really nice. And so like, if you have that ability to like try a few different things, I think that would be great as well. Whereas you had to quit your job to realize that was the thing that was making you unhappy in the moment because you weren't feeling whatever it was. Where I was fortunate enough where my November slowed down and I had this realization of like, I really enjoy running this business a lot, because I had that opportunity. Obviously I was back to work at the end of November into December and everything, and here we are. But that was a really cool moment where I had that realization. And it was also interesting because like that avoided my burnout in general because I had a break from other things. I could actually spend way more time doing this and I'm not burnt out at all from this right now.
The bags under your eyes tell a different story.
I'm sure a lot of people out there have experienced moments of like, being done, totally losing motivation and stuff. So if you're listening to this on a podcast platform and you want to get interacted or you want to interact with the other people, you can go check out our Discord, or you can go find this on YouTube and you can comment. And if you are on YouTube, I'd love to hear what, moments when I don't want to hear about the moments where you burnt out, but I'm curious to, like what caused a burnout? What did you realize was the solution to that? Or how did you fix your lack of motivation in a particular moment?
Yeah. For those of you who either overcame burnout and kept working on your business, let us know what allowed that to happen. And for those of you who decided either closing a store or any other business, how did you come to the true conclusion? And dealing with the, I guess, psychological aftermath as well, if that's something you want to share, of accepting that this either is something you can't do or something that you don't want to do. Because I think, there needs to be more knowledge out there on how to exit a business as well, which we don't have any experience on that. But maybe that's an episode at some point in the future too, is trying to figure out
kind of building an
advice.
exit strategy.
Yeah.
We would need to need to do that, but we have no exit strategy right now, which is probably something we should also figure out, and then we can maybe do that episode. But yeah, and then as always, if you have any suggestions or questions that we can turn into a conversation, on this podcast, and you want to know more about something, the way we do it, or something of our thoughts on a particular topic, let us know, and we can hopefully bring that to you in the future. So thank you for watching or listening wherever you are, and if you're watching on YouTube, you can listen to this on any podcast platform. I say that every time. Thanks for watching episode 5 of BrickSide Chat. We will see you in the next one.
Goodbye.